Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we turn our attention to Syria, a country that has suffered over a decade of civil war. And of course, we know that after a 10 days offensive, rebel forces have toppled Bashar al-Assad's government. But still we know that the uncertainties and instability remains in Syria. Meanwhile, we know that Israel has attacked, of course, many sites in Syria, and the reports are claiming that over 80% of Syrian military has been destroyed in these attacks. In today's program, we will be talking about the dimensions of Syria's instability and how this is impacting the region and regional implications at large. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Major General retired Zahid Mehmood, who is a defense analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We're also joined online by Mr. Fraz Naqvi, who is Middle East expert. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Faiz Rehman, who is senior journalist. Welcome to the program. Major Zahid Mehmood, let me start with you. When we look at this unfolding situation in Syria, of course, this is very unpredictable when we look at the way rebel forces toppled Assad's government, who ruled over Syria for over 50 years. What were the elements that led to this, this situation?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maryam, first of all, thank you very much for the invite. Thank you very much for selecting this important topic, because the Syrian situation and the Middle East is not only impacting the region, but it is impacting the international application. This war has been quite complex. So we can very conveniently say that this has been a war of proxies, which we have seen. And to be very honest, even today, after this, what all has happened so quickly, and shockingly so quickly, that it is very difficult to make any commentary or to say that Damascus has fallen or Damascus is free now. So because of all the proxies coming into this. So it happened, Assad regime, you have already alluded that for 50 years they have ruled this region. Syria's an important, most important country in the regions. There is a quote of Henry Kissinger that Arabs can't make a war without Egypt, and Arabs can't make peace without Syria. So Syria was a key factor, one of the key state in that region. And today what we see is that the missing piece is the Syrian people, and the solution which we are looking at, or the future which we are looking at, is that might be coming from the external forces more as compared to a homegrown solution.
Right.
The people of Syria and Syria itself is missing from the mosaic. And let's see how it develops in the future.
And talking about external forces, Mr. Faiz, of course, we know that Russia has been a key factor, a key protector, as per many analysts, of Assad's regime. How do you see this in context of course, a fall of Assad's government, especially when we know that Russia has been, of course, involved in the ongoing war in Ukraine?
Thank you, Maryam. It's good to be on your show again. So, I mean, if you look back in 2011, when Obama was in the White House and the entire administration had put Bashar al-Assad on notice that, he had to leave. And that was a determination. But then the powers to be, or, the international players, they decided to keep him in Syria, but in a very weak position. But that also gave an opportunity to the Russians to basically get in and establish a few bases and their foothold in Syria. And of course, we all know Iran also became an important player. It's been a player for a long time, but of course they gained a little bit more space and more say in the affairs in that region. Why Russia kind of, withdrew, why Iranians were forced to basically kind of, pull back, it's because the world powers, especially like the Americans and the Europeans, they saw that probably it's about time that Syria must go because Hezbollah in Lebanon being totally disseminated. Hamas situation, more than 45,000 Palestinians killed. So nobody is in a situation to use one or several of their proxies in the region. So it was probably they saw this as a golden opportunity. And you see this not just one, I mean, we see this probably a monolith kind of a revolution. I wouldn't even call it a revolution, but there were several factions, military, militants, they were actually involved in this kind of Assad overthrow. So why Russians withdrew? Because, of course, they didn't want to stretch themselves too much, having been involved for years in Ukrainian war, and Americans and the Europeans focusing more on Ukraine. So I think Putin saw this as probably, I wouldn't say an opportunity, but probably he had to weigh his options. And he kind of, thought that, it's better to pull back from Syria and focus on Ukraine, because Ukraine is, of course, they're next door. And any diplomacy.
Right, but how this is going to be looking for the future of Syria and for strategic moves of Russia, we will be discussing later in the program. But coming to you, Fraz, when we talk about Ahmad al-Shara, who is the leader of HTS and now commander-in-chief of the new administration, he has announced that all the armed faction will be dissolved. How practical, in your opinion, is his announcement, and especially given the history of factionalism in Syria?
Well, thank you so much, Maria, for inviting me to your show. Well, disarming the other militant group, I think that is quite beneficial for HTS, because we see, as my colleagues have previously mentioned, that it is not a monolithic movement. Instead, the rebels' offensive towards Damascus and other parts of Syria, it was basically the amalgamation of various militant groups, including Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as well as Free Syrian Army, Syrian National Army, as well as Tahrir al-Sham, and some of the sleeping cells of ISIS as well, who basically penetrated into these rebels group and operated from there. So, and one thing that all of these groups share with each other, that is the extremist ideology, the radical ideology. So it is quite natural for HTS to announce that, being the bigger player, relatively speaking, to announce that all of the other militant groups or factions would have to lay down their arms, because there are two objectives. The first one was to topple Assad, in which all of these rebel groups have been succeeded. But the other group is to get the share of the spoils of war and to get hold on the resources of the Syria. So if there are multiple groups, armed groups, who are the contenders of those spoils, I think there would be infighting. There is a chance of infighting, as we have seen in 1990s in Afghanistan, where different factions of the otherwise called Mujahideen fought with each other. So the same could be replicated here in Syria. But I think it would be quite difficult to achieve this objective, because everyone is basically eyeing towards having some sort of share. Smaller or bigger doesn't matter, but at least some sort of influence in the Syria, because everyone has their own objectives. For example, HTS is basically trying to promote the Islamist ideology, while some faction in Syrian National Army, they are of secular orientation, as well as if we talk about Kurds, so they are basically eyeing for their autonomy. So there is not a singular player. There are different rebels groups supported by different external parts. So I think I foresee that in the near future, the chances of infighting between the different factions of rebels, they are quite probable. And I think it would put Syria into the chaotic situation that would not be a good sign for the neighboring states.
So in your opinion, at this point in time, this seems quite unrealistic when we talk about. But Jonas, coming back to you, when we talk about the statement from HTS, Ahmad al-Shara, he also announced that transitional government will be implemented in in Syria, and of course the general amnesty for Assad's soldiers. How do you think this is going to be impacting his standing amongst not only Syrians but in international community?
Maryam, this is a very important question, to be very honest, and this will set the tone, and this will set a stage for a longer peace or a total peace in Syria. You know, if Abu Muhammad, as you have said, that he's speaking about the government of the Syrians, if that government is of the Syrians, for the Syrians, by the Syrians, what I want to say is that, I mean, is that if it is all inclusive government, then there is a chance of little bit peace in Syria. But again, if it is if this government is made with the help of maybe United States, with the approval of Turkey, and with the approval of Israel, and the Western countries, then probably again we are I'm afraid that we are going to see a long drawn civil war. So it depends upon Abu Muhammad and those forces who will be implementing. Now, in the recent past, the conference which has taken place in West Asia, in that United States was there, probably UK was there, and I mean Western people were there, then Turkey was there in that conference, but there was no one. You know, Iran is missing, Russia is missing. Now it will depend on how Iranians are taking this situation, how Russians are. They have their problems back home, so an extremely dangerous, unpredictable situation has already been created back home. You know, Russia is involved with Ukraine, and Iran has already been targeted. So Iran has lost the so-called, I mean, proxies, whether they were right or wrong. But
Axis
you know,
of resistance.
yes, so axis of resistance. So they have lost the resistance. Hamas is taken out. Then the targeting of other faction in Hezbollah in Lebanon. You know, so their proxies are already out. So these are already out. But once again, I will say that if this is a government by the Syrians, for the Syrians inside Syria, then we are going to have a little bit of peace. Otherwise, it's going to be a long drawn civil conflict. We have the example of Afghanistan. Now this is the government of those who have all in their lives, they have been fighting. The gun has always been a prominent factor in their diplomacy. The same is the case in Abu Muhammad case. He has been a fighter. He was associated with Al Qaeda, though I mean from Al Nusra Front to this new form, because that organization was proscribed. But the fundamental aspects of the politics belongs to the warring factions, and the war and the gun has always been the lead role in the policy. So how he will behave as a statesman, that's a $1 million question.
Of course.
So this is not a government which is coming in power through some democratic process. So this is a byproduct of the war, and the governments which come as a byproduct of the war, probably they are not in a better position to dispense justice, to dispense, to keep everybody on board, So they have their own way of
dealing with
the day-to-day business.
So what's your take on this, Mr. Faiz, especially when we look at the recent statement by US President-elect Donald Trump, who said that this is a friendly takeover of Syria by Turkey. How interesting, in your opinion, is this statement?
Yes, I mean, thank you for bringing this up. Actually, I was about to say that we shouldn't forget that there is there are multiple sides and facets to this crisis, and Trump's incoming administration is one of them. Of course, the incoming president, he has put his prestige online by saying that he wants to resolve that issue on his first day in the office, and he called this issue. It's very easy to resolve. It's easy to be solved. So let's see what happens. But of course, I think there are some personal interests, some personal family interests on the line in that region. Trump's, son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is a Zionist himself. His daughter is a converted Jew. And of course, some of his, very close, friends are also interested in that crisis. So of course, this situation in the U.S. is also going to play out. But when he said, I think he didn't say it in a very positive way about Turkey. He kind of complained that Turkey is being Turkey is kind of taking advantage of the situation. But Turkey wouldn't have done it without the support of the Biden administration and the Europeans, and of course the overall, even the Israelis. So Turkey, it was a great chance, an opportunity for Erdogan to step in and basically establish his kind of area of influence in that region, and he gladly accepted those offers. So it's a multiple kind of parties' interest game, and if you look at the beneficiaries, I think Israel would be one of the biggest beneficiary of this whole the outcome, what's happening. And but going back to General Saab's comment about Abu Muhammad, Julani. I mean, if you look at the situation right now, I think, and Fraz also raised this issue, but even though he's been portrayed in the Western media as a much changed man, you've been seeing his pictures, smiles, and such a very such soft sides of his personality all over the media in the West. But at the same time, State Department still has him listed as a terrorist. So they wouldn't remove him, I don't think very shortly. He still has a $10 million prize money on his head, even though British are talking to him. They are deeply engaged, but still there's a lot to be seen in the coming days. But what I think is going to happen right now, I don't fear any major, as long as the Americans and the Europeans are involved, Israel is involved. I don't see any major breakout in kind of a civil war. But I think it's just wait and see on part of these militant groups. They
Right,
want to
right.
be under
It's
one defense ministry.
right, Mr. Faiz, it's wait and see policy on part of the West, and when we look at EU, US, and other countries. But at the same time, Faraz, do you think that Israel is trying to fill that gap, that instability in Syria? Because we know that Israel has launched its biggest ever airstrikes in Syria, and reports claiming that 80% of Syrian military has been destroyed. What do you make of this situation?
Well, Mariam, in my personal and humble opinion, I think that Israel would have preferred the weak Assad government instead of these rebels dominated government, because weak Assad government was suitable for Israel in multiple sense. For example, Israel was freely targeting the militias inside Syria as well as some of the Iranian commanders as well, and the reluctance of Bashar al-Assad to engage Israel in another conflict also benefited Israel. But the current scenario is quite unpredictable, and that is why what Israel is basically trying to do is to both for defensive purposes as well as to exploit the situation. We are all aware that Israel has a short strategic depth. So in order to enhance its strategic depth, Israel is basically creating settlements in the occupied Golan Heights, and also creating a buffer zone extending up to approximately 50 kilometer deep inside the Syrian territory. That is because of the fact that
It's going.
any splinter group that is going out of the main HTS leadership would be problematic for Israel as well, because although there are various statements by different officials of HTS, different leadership members of HTS, that they would not allow anyone to use the Syrian soil against Israel, and they have been giving assurances to Israel that Israel would not face any sort of threat from this rebel-led government. But as I have previously mentioned, that there is not a monolithic government. It is basically a amalgamation of different groups. So any group that would prefer to just pull away from the main leadership would be problematic for Israel. And in social media, we have been seeing that there are statements and videos as well from different rebels commander that they are basically saying that after Damascus they would charge towards Tel Aviv. So I think this is why Israel is basically trying to enhance the buffer zone to secure itself, as well as to exploit the situation, so that the Syrian military capabilities would not be utilized by the rebels group. That would in turn be a you can say a security dilemma for Israel.
Israel in future, of course, and let me take the same point to General Saab. General Saab, what's your take on this about the points that Fraz alluded to? Israel is not only, of course, expanding its settlements in Golan Heights, but also it is striking military bases and of course, civilian areas as well in Syria. What do you make of this, especially when we look at it in the context of implications for the future of Middle East?
Look, commenting on what Fraz was saying, for the West, for United States, changing their stance without wasting any time will not be a new thing for us. Pakistan has already suffered from whatever has happened in Afghanistan. So these Mujahideens, they were part of the coalition, they were in the White House, they were welcomed in United States of America, and the moment they wanted to change the tide, they labeled them as terrorists, they proscribed them. So whenever they would want to, take out Abu Muhammad, so they will again start branding him. Nowadays, if you watch the media, the mostly documentaries and mostly follow-up is on the atrocities by the Assad regime. So they want to tell the world that under Assad regime, the Syrian people were suffering. Nobody is talking about the Israel. Nobody is talking about Gaza. Nobody is talking about West Bank. Nobody is talking about these 45,000 people who have died, 106 injured. Gaza will take 50, 60 years. So it depends on the West and their controlled media, which is part of their military strategy. So whenever they would they wanted to weaken Damascus. We all know that Damascus, after they have already taken out Iraq from the Middle Eastern politics. They have taken out Egypt is on one side now. They are no more that effective. As I quoted Henry Kissinger that once they want to win any war, the Egypt has a play to role. So the warring quality of this Middle East, our collaboration, our front, that has already been they have been sided. Damascus was a capital. Damascus has a value in the Muslim world and especially in the Middle East also. So Jordan is quite now here. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they will also be in the contesting mode. So the regional countries and the Muslim world is already they put them in some friction with each other. Maybe on the sectarian lines, maybe on the political lines. Now there will be pull and push between Saudi Arabia and Turkey in this form. So coming back to the point that if I repeat my point that if it is going to be an inclusive government, then the world can be told by the Syrian people that look, this regime represent all the factions. The Kurds are a part of that, the Shias are part of that government, the Kurds are part of that government, anybody who is living in Syria, all inclusive and a homegrown solution. If that is applied, then there will be some moral responsibility. But unfortunately, morality in the international politics and morality in the war is at the lowest.
Right.
Trump, when he will come to the office, we will see a new Trump probably. And if he is taking off his hands, as he has claimed that they will be taking off hands from Syria, and he has some leverage with Putin also and Ukrainian issues. So if they are addressing the war issues in Ukraine and Russia, then we might see a little bit positive here.
Right.
But today the winner of this whole scenario is Israel, and the biggest loser is Palestine. Then people have their stakes. That doesn't matter much.
And talking about Israel, Mr. Faiz, what do you make of course, the recent attacks that we are discussing by Israel? And HTS has already condemned these Israeli attacks, but we did not see any retaliation by these rebel forces at this point in time. Of course, Ahmad al-Shara has said that it is clear violation of 1974 ceasefire agreement. What do you make of these statements, and how do you see the role of UN in all this?
Okay, so there are two important points to remember, Maryam, here. First of all, why the Israelis and the West chose this time to dislodge Assad. Okay, so because, after having basically demolished the Hezbollah network in Lebanon, they wanted to make sure that the supply line to their weapons from, from Iran is also kind of eliminated. So that was one of the reasons that, even though, as I said before, in 2011, they had decided, the West had decided to basically just get rid of Assad. But they again changed the mind, and they thought maybe it was in their interest to keep him a very like kind of a loose and a weak regime, which can serve their purposes. But the situation has changed, and now you see Hezbollah is almost gone. Hamas is kind of now, today as we speak, they're negotiating for peace. And after, of course, unfortunately losing more than 45,000 innocent people, innocent lives. And Iran is kind of, back to the wall. Russians are back to their own fight in Ukraine. So it's a win-win situation for all of them. So why did they strike all those military installations in Syria? Because they wanted to make sure that the remaining Assad loyals, Assad, friendly factions within society, they shouldn't regroup and use the same, weapons against Israel, or even, against these militant groups. So I think it kind of, even though they kind of, in formally did protest against these strikes, but I think it was in their own interest to make sure that there's no resistance from the Assad loyalists, the remaining loyalists. So it's one of those reasons that you see these
Right.
unprecedented strikes. I think more than, if not 400, probably more than 300 strikes. They completely demolished the Russian, sorry, the Assad remaining forces. So the supply lines to the region in Lebanon and Gaza, and of course making sure that the Assad loyalists don't regroup and harm their interests, or refight or come back to fight these militants. These were the two important points to be taken
Right.
into account, in my opinion.
Right, right. And Faraz, when we talk about this ongoing escalation by Israel in Syria, do you think that this is going to be provoking Iran into retaliation, further escalating tensions in the region?
I don't see it like that, Mariam, because as previously mentioned by my colleagues, the Syrian debacle was a setback for Iran. But I do disagree slightly that yes, the Iran's axis of resistance strategy has gone weakened. There is no doubt about that. But Iranian relations with its proxy partners, whether it be Hamas or Hezbollah, or for that matter Houthis in Yemen, I think it would not have any major impact on these relations. And the capabilities of Iran as a state and these proxies, specifically Hezbollah and Houthis, as an independent force, not as a proxy of anyone, I think there is no doubt about that, that they have some sort of capabilities. And that is why we saw that despite having about a month-long effort by Israeli forces to intrude into the southern Lebanon territory, they were not successful in this regard. And we have also seen that Houthis have demonstrated their capability of striking down Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel through some ballistic missiles. Some say it might be hypersonic missile, but those claims are questionable. But anyhow, the military side of these militant groups, I think they are pretty much in charge of what is going on right now in that particular region. But regarding your question that whether Israeli strikes would be aiming at provoking Iran, I think it is not the case because right now Iran does not have any sort of asset or strategic assets in Syria. So whether Israel destroys the entirety of Syrian militant force, or to basically create a buffer zone inside the Syrian territory, I think it is not going to provoke Iran. On the contrary, I think Iran would try to exploit the unstable situation inside Syria. And let us not forget that some of the Syrian Arab army soldiers went to Iraq, and they are currently at the Syrian Iraqi border. So Iran might utilize those remaining loyalists of Assad and regroup them and try to fund or sponsor them, and
Right.
to create a counter offensive. So I think there is a possibility, but in the provocative sense, I think there is not. Yes, there is a possibility in this regard that the pressure is mounting upon the President Pezeshkian from domestic fronts, that he should basically decide whether take action in the context of true promise 3. So I think this could be a scenario, but related to Syria, I think there is no such sort of provocation as such.
General Sahab, let's talk about post-Assad Syria and rebuilding of Syria. How difficult is this task going to be? Of course, we know that HTS has promised of a new constitution, free elections and protecting minority rights. But what challenges do you foresee?
You see, Maryam, I think it's too early to predict the future of Syria. Probably in a month's time, we'll have a little bit more understanding of the circumstances, that how quickly they have taken over this Syria, how quickly Assad regime was taken out. So probably if, again I will repeat my comment, that if there is less application of external forces, then probably the people of Syria will have little peace, you know. And now here we can take example of Turkey, you know. So there are around 7 million refugees Syrian refugees who have to come back. Now they were in Turkey. Turkey is in contesting mode with United States as far as the Kurds are concerned, and the Kurds are the only force it is being considered that will challenge the resurgence or the re-emergence of the ISIS, if that is in region. So all these players have their own interests. So this conflict of interest will never allow even Abu Muhammad to have a stable government. They would like to have their participation in the future policies of Syria, you know. No, at the moment everybody is trying to be cozying up with the Abu Muhammad, you know, and they are trying to have his little sympathy, or maybe he's being used by someone.
Or trying to engage with him.
Yes, try to engage with him. Basically they are engaging with him not for the people of Syria, to be very honest. They are engaging with him to protect their own interest in that region. Until the time we are not addressing, the international community is not addressing the major issue, that is Israel and Palestinian issue, that is the war. War itself has its own ills. Till the time we don't have a peace, we can't have stable regions. We can't have stable economies. Who would invest in Syria today?
Right.
Who would bring peace to, I mean, who would bring, I mean, so everything is related with the war, the outcome of the war. War is not yet over.
Right.
So this is a genocidal war. It has so many things attached to it. Even the, you know, these Israelis, they are engaging the United Nations, UNRWA, and you know, so what is happening there? So humanity is under stress, and there is a tacit approval. Now it will depend on the Trump, the new Trump, if he stays whatever he has promised with the world, that there will be a peace in the region. He's trying for the peace in Russia, Ukraine war, he's trying for the peace in this part of the world. Then we might have some positive signs which will bring peace and stability in Syria. Otherwise, it is totally depending upon the outcome of the war in that region.
Right, and Mr. Faiz, when we talk about the point that, of course, General Saab alluded to about engagement with the HTS, of course, we know that recently EU's envoy to Syria has met with the new administration. In your opinion, what does it signal about Europe's willingness to engage with this group that was previously sanctioned and still is sanctioned?
Well, Maryam, if you, unfortunately, every now and then you hear about these acronyms, HTS, ISSS, SSS, you know, all these XYZ, all these, have we ever wondered about how these acronyms or these abbreviations come up into the, you know, world of politics or into the mainstream? And we also, I mean, HTS was, it may have been there for some time, but all of a sudden you see this as an important player and the leader in this again kind of overthrow of the Assad regime. So of course it was supported by the Europeans, by the world powers, Americans, Israelis, and there was a purpose. The purpose is to make sure that Israel is secure from all sides. and it doesn't get any support from the Syrians, and Syria is not used as a vessel or as a passage for the supplies to the proxies in the region. So I think in the overall, if you look at, unfortunately, I mean, I hate to say this, but this is probably a bitter fact that the best or the largest beneficiary of all this situation is Israel. They have probably secured their borders from all sides. And what Trump's been saying all along, that they wanted peace in the region, and I think I have said this on your program before, he wants peace with a total victory for Israel. That means, giving them a full security, they're secure from every side. There's no resistance from within those, the occupied territories. Lebanon is almost like totally neutralized. Assad is gone. Supply chain is gone. So he wants this to happen at the expense of other players in the region, giving some crumbs to the Saudis, to Turkey, to Erdogan, to be specific, and maybe some other smaller factions. But at the same time, this all was the whole game was. This is my opinion, I think, and
right. But moving
event
forward.
support.
Moving forward, briefly, Mr. Faiz, tell us that when we talk about EU, US, and of course, US and UK, they remain cautious at this point in time about lifting sanctions on HTS. Do you think these sanctions are going to be hindering Syria's progress, keeping in mind the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding each day?
I don't think they will be too much concerned about the humanitarian crises. You have seen this all along. I mean, look at Afghanistan, even Pakistan, and some other areas. I mean, they create these crises, and then, of course, come to help. But by then, millions and millions of people have suffered. So what EU is basically concerned is about their own security and survival. Look what's happening in Ukraine. Trump having said that he may pull out from NATO. So I don't think they have a lot leeway in that situation. America would remain the main player with, of course, and they'll be supporting Israel in that sense. But EU will be too much bogged down with their own security issues. If Trump basically, goes on and tries to do what he's saying he wants to do with the NATO, it will be a major issue for the EU. So they wanted to make sure that, yes, again, as I said before, it's going to be a lot of wait and see from EU, from Americans, especially from the British. But they're very engaged right now. As we speak, the British are talking to HTS and other factions, and then I guess this announcement by Julani that all the factions will come under the defense ministry is probably an outcome of those talks. So they're trying to stabilize the situation. But remember one thing, Maryam, we should remember that they don't want Syria to be a very strong, very stable country. They want to have some kind of just like a token.
Of course.
Yes.
Lastly. Unfortunately, we are pressed for time. My last question to you, General Saab, is that how critical is the caretakers' March 2025 deadline for holding elections? And in your opinion, do you foresee elections to be held in Syria?
Look, Maryam, I think Faiz Rehman Saab has hit the bull. He has spoken about the controlled chaos and coining of these terms. So there are big powers. So if these big powers has decided that they want peace in the region, they want total peace in the region, and stability is there, then we are going to see elections. And if it is, I have already said that it depends upon the players now in that region. So if they all join hand together for the people of Syria, for the people of Lebanon, because this regional solution has to be there, it is not Syria alone or Lebanon alone or Palestine alone. So if they are going for a regional solution, they are going for the anti-war sentiments are put into action. So then we are going to have elections. Otherwise, he has already hinted at the controlled chaos, so they will use this as a new proxy till the time it is useful for them.
Right. Faraz, your last comments on the future of Syria and of course the unfolding situation in Middle East.
Well, Mariam, to be very honest and to be very frank, I think Syria would witness the same scenario as Afghanistan had witnessed in 1990s. So, in one liner, I would say that Syria would become the next Afghanistan of the Middle East, and it would be chaotic situation for not only the Syrian people but also for the entire region, specifically the regional countries and neighboring countries. I think Turkey has gained some short-term advantage, but in a longer term, I think it would also be problematic for Turkey as well. Regarding the Gaza situation, I think it has been put on the back burner, unfortunately, because of the unfolding of Syrian crisis. But I think for the Israeli as well, Israel might have been succeeded in creating the buffer zone, but we never know that what the extremist ideology would turn up. So I think as far as or as long as radicalization or extremism is there inside Syria, I don't see any sort of democratic elections being held upon by May 2025 or by the end of 2025, because these are not the democratic people. These are basically the rebels. As General Saab has mentioned, that they have never experienced statesmanship. They have for all their lifelong, they have witnessed wars and battlefields. So I think it would put Syria more into the conflictual scenario, and I think
Unfortunately, that has to be the last word because we are pressed for time. Of course, I thank all three of my panelists for joining us in today's program, and as we conclude today's discussion, it is clear that Syria stands at a critical crossroads, and of course in the coming days we will be discussing this unfolding situation. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.